The sun bore down mercilessly on the dusty town of Bitter Creek, where the earth cracked like broken promises and the wind carried more despair than hope. The ramshackle buildings leaned against each other like drunken men, their weathered boards bleached bone-white by years of unforgiving heat. This was the edge of civilization, where the law was as sparse as the rainfall and mercy even scarcer. Clara Whitmore pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of the barn, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Through the thin walls, she could hear her mother-in-law's voice, sharp as a cavalry saber. Another girl, worthless as her mother. The old woman's words cut through the stifling afternoon air. 3 daughters and not a single son to carry the Whitmore name. Might as well be breeding chickens. Clara's arms trembled as she cradled her newborn daughter. Barely 3 days old, the baby's thin wail pierced the air, a sound that should have brought joy, but instead brought only dread. Her other daughters, Emma at 6 and Rose at 4, huddled in the corner of the barn, their eyes wide with the wisdom that came too early to children in hard places. The barn door slammed open, and Clara's husband, Samuel Whitmore, filled the doorway. His face was flushed with drink and rage, his work-roughened hands clenched into fists. The smell of whiskey and sweat preceded him like a warning. "You hear my mother, woman?" His voice was low and dangerous. 3 girls, 3 mouths to feed and nothing to show for it but more burden. Clara instinctively pulled her baby closer. "Samuel, please, she's healthy. That's all that matters." The slap came swift and hard. Snapping Clara's head to the side, she tasted copper as blood filled her mouth. The baby screamed louder, and Clara's body shook as she tried to soothe her while her own vision blurred with tears. "Don't you dare talk back to me." Samuel growled. "Healthy? What good is a healthy girl? Can't work the fields like a son. Can't carry on the family legacy. Just another dowry to scrape together, another mouth stealing food from the table." Little Emma crept forward, her small hands reaching for her mother. "Mama? Stay back. Emma!" Clara whispered urgently, but it was too late. Samuel's boot caught the child in the side, sending her tumbling into the hay. Rose began to cry silently, tears streaming down her dust-stained cheeks. The baby's cries grew weaker, and Clara realized with growing panic that she had no milk. 3 days of beatings and little food had dried up what little her body could produce. She pressed the infant to her breast anyway, praying for a miracle that wouldn't come. "I need to go to town," Clara said quietly, keeping her eyes downcast. "To trade for some milk. The baby needs a mother who can birth sons," Samuel spat. "But go. Take your worthless eggs and see what charity you can beg. Maybe someone will take pity on a failure of a woman." Clara waited until Samuel stumbled back toward the house before she slowly rose to her feet. Every movement sent pain shooting through her bruised ribs, but she had endured worse. She always endured. "Emma, Rose," she whispered. "Stay here. Stay quiet. Mama will be back soon." The walk to town was 2 miles under the scorching sun. Clara's dress, patched and repatched, clung to her sweat-soaked skin. The baby lay still against her chest, too weak now to cry. In her other arm, she carried a basket with 6 precious eggs, her only currency in a world that valued her less than the chickens that laid them. Bitter Creek's main street was little more than a wide dirt path between false-fronted buildings. The general store stood at the center, its painted sign faded but still proclaiming Henderson's Goods, fair prices, fair deals. Clara had learned long ago that fairness was a luxury reserved for those who could afford it. She pushed open the door, wincing at the bell that announced her arrival. James Henderson looked up from his ledger, his expression souring when he saw her. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, the greeting devoid of warmth. "I hope you've come to settle your account." I have eggs," Clara said, lifting her basket slightly. "Fresh this morning. I was hoping to trade for some cornmeal, and perhaps a small tin of milk for the baby." Henderson's laugh was harsh. "Eggs? Your family owes me near $20. You think 6 eggs cover that? Please, Mr. Henderson, the baby hasn't eaten properly in days. Just a small tin. No charity here." Henderson cut her off. "You want milk? Pay cash. Otherwise, get out. You're scaring off paying customers." Clara's cheeks burned with shame as she noticed the other patrons in the store, Mrs. Davidson from the boarding house, the Garrett brothers who ran the livery, all watching with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. "Please," Clara whispered once more, hating how the word tasted but forcing it past her lips anyway. "She's just a baby." Henderson came around the counter, his bulk imposing. "I said get out." He grabbed Clara's arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks, and shoved her toward the door. The basket flew from her grip, eggs smashing against the floor in a mess of yellow and white. Clara stumbled, catching herself against the doorframe, but the momentum was too much. She fell hard onto the wooden sidewalk outside, curling her body to protect the baby even as her knees and palms scraped raw against the rough planks. "And don't come back until you can pay," Henderson shouted. Slamming the door behind her, Clara remained on her knees for a moment, the baby finally stirring with weak cries. People walked past, their boots kicking up dust that settled on her skin. But no one stopped. No one ever stopped. "Ma'am?" The voice was deep and unfamiliar. Clara looked up to see a man silhouetted against the harsh sun, his face shadowed by a worn hat. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked with their hands and horses rather than cattle and plows. His clothes were simple but clean, the mark of a man who took care with what little he had. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and there was something in his voice Clara couldn't identify. It wasn't pity. Exactly. It was harder than that. Angrier. "I'm fine," Clara lied, struggling to stand. The stranger's hand appeared in her vision, steady and patient. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. His grip was gentle but firm, and he helped her to her feet as if she weighed nothing, now that she could see him properly. Clara noticed the lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting against the sun and carrying sorrows too heavy for one man. His jaw was set tight, and he was looking past her at the general store with an expression that made Clara take an involuntary step back. "Henderson do that to you?" the man asked. "It doesn't matter," Clara said quickly. "I should go. My children are waiting." The stranger, for she had never seen him before, and in a town like Bitter Creek, everyone knew everyone, finally looked directly at her. His eyes were gray like winter storm clouds, and they took in everything. The bruises on her arms, the blood on her lip, the baby too quiet against her chest. Without a word, he strode past her into the store. Clara heard raised voices, Henderson's blustering protests cut short by words too low for her to catch. A few moments later, the stranger emerged carrying a sack of cornmeal, several tins, and a small bottle of fresh milk. "I can't," Clara started, but he was already pressing the goods into her arms. "You can and you will," he said firmly. "That baby needs feeding. I have no money. I didn't ask for any." He reached into the sack and pulled out a wrapped packet of what smelled like fresh bread. "This too." "When's the last time you ate a proper meal?" Clara couldn't answer. She couldn't remember. The stranger's jaw tightened further. "There's more in there. Dried beans. Salt pork. Should last a few days if you're careful." "Why?" Clara whispered, clutching the supplies like they might disappear. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he said simply. Then, softer, "I know what it's like to watch someone suffer when suffering ain't necessary. Get home to your children, ma'am, and if anyone gives you trouble about accepting help, you tell them Jed Collins has a problem with how this town treats its women and children." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to walk away. Clara stood frozen, watching him head toward a horse tied at the far end of the street, a beautiful bay mare that stood patient despite the heat. "Mr. Collins," she called out, not sure what she wanted to say, but knowing she needed to say something. He paused, looking back. "Thank you," she managed. Something passed over his face then, too quick to read. "You take care of that baby, ma'am, and yourself." Clara watched until he mounted his horse and rode out of town. heading west toward the hills where she'd heard a few stubborn ranchers still tried to make a living. Then she turned toward home, her steps careful but steadier now, the weight of kindness somehow lighter than the weight of despair. She didn't see the curtains twitch in windows as she passed, didn't hear the whispers that started before she was even out of sight, but she felt them, the way she always felt the town's judgment. Only this time, there was something else mixed in with the usual contempt. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe just surprise that someone like Jed Collins, the hermit rancher who'd lost his wife and child to fever 3 years back and hadn't been to town since except for supplies, would involve himself in the affairs of a woman like her. Clara walked faster, suddenly aware that Samuel would be wondering what took so long. The baby stirred against her chest, and Clara allowed herself one moment of hope that tonight, at least, all her daughters would sleep with full bellies. She didn't let herself think about what price she might pay for accepting help from a stranger. In her experience, there was always a price. But as she reached the edge of their property and saw Emma's face peeking out from the barn door, Clara decided that whatever came next, it had been worth it to see hope in her daughter's eyes. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky the color of blood and promises. Clara squared her shoulders and walked toward whatever waited for her, the taste of kindness still foreign on her lips. The night arrived with the certainty of violence. Clara had learned to read the signs like a farmer reads the weather. The heavy tread on the porch, the slam of the door that shook the whole house, the particular quality of silence that preceded the storm. Samuel stood in the doorway of their small kitchen, swaying slightly, his eyes red-rimmed and dangerous. The smell of cheap whiskey rolled off him in waves. Well, he drawled, his gaze falling on the remnants of cornbread on the table. Looks like my wife's been busy. Where'd you get the meal for that, Clara? Clara kept her back to him, stirring the thin soup she'd managed to make. I traded the eggs, like you said. Eggs. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Henderson told me different. Said you left with nothing but bruises until some stranger came in. Said the man bought you supplies. Clara's hand stilled on the spoon. He was just being charitable. The baby was crying. The bowl of soup went flying, hot liquid splashing across the wall. Samuel grabbed Clara's arm, spinning her around. What did you do for it? His breath was hot on her face. What did you give him? No man gives something for nothing. Nothing, I swear. Samuel, he just... His fist connected with her stomach, driving the air from her lungs. Clara doubled over, gasping, and he grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. You think I'm stupid? You think the whole town ain't talking about how my wife was whoring herself for cornmeal? Another blow, this one to her ribs. Clara fell to her knees, her vision swimming. Through the haze of pain, she saw Emma standing in the doorway, her small face white with terror. Papa, please, Emma whispered. Mama didn't do nothing wrong. Samuel turned his rage on the child, backhanding her with casual cruelty. Emma flew backward, blood streaming from her nose, and that's when something inside Clara snapped. Don't touch her! She lunged at Samuel, clawing at his face, driven by a mother's desperate fury. But he was stronger, meaner, and drunk enough not to hold back. The beating that followed was methodical in its brutality. Samuel knew exactly where to hit to cause the most pain without leaving marks that would show. Clara tried to shield herself, tried to crawl away, but there was nowhere to go. She must have lost consciousness at some point because the next thing she knew, she was lying on the kitchen floor. Every breath agony. The house was quiet except for the sound of her daughters crying softly in the next room. Then, hoofbeats, fast and hard, coming up the road. Samuel heard them too. He paused in pulling on his boots, frowning. Who the hell? The door exploded inward with such force it nearly came off its hinges. Jed Collins filled the doorway, his gray eyes taking in the scene. Clara on the floor, blood on the walls. Emma visible through the doorway with her face swollen and red. Get up, Jed said quietly to Samuel. His hand rested on the gun at his hip. This is my house, Samuel snarled. My wife. You got no right. I said get up. Jed's voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it that made Samuel take a step back. You want to beat on someone. You try it with someone who can fight back. You don't understand. Samuel started. She's my wife. The law says... I don't give a damn what the law says. Jed moved into the room, and Samuel scrambled backward. You know what I see? I see a coward who beats women and children. Know what we do with cowards where I come from? Samuel went for his gun, but Jed was faster. His revolver was oared out and pressed against Samuel's temple before the other man could clear leather. Drop it, Jed ordered. The gun clattered to the floor. Now get on your knees. You can't... Jed cocked the hammer. Knees, now. Samuel dropped, his face going from red to white. Please, shut up. Jed's voice was ice. Clara, can you stand? Clara tried, failed, tried again. This time she made it to her feet, using the wall for support. Get your girls, Jed said, never taking his eyes off Samuel. Get whatever you need. You're leaving. I can't. This is a grave if you stay, Jed said flatly. How long before he kills you, or one of them? Get your girls. Clara, now! Something in his tone broke through her shock. Clara stumbled to the other room where her daughters huddled together. Emma was trying to comfort Rose while holding the baby, her face a mask of blood and bravery that no 6-year-old should wear. Come on, sweethearts, Clara whispered, gathering them to her. We're going on a trip. With the nice man? Rose asked through her tears. Yes, baby, with the nice man. Clara grabbed their few possessions, a change of clothes for each girl. The rag doll Emma couldn't sleep without, the thin blanket that was all the baby had, everything fit in one small bundle. When she returned to the kitchen, Samuel was still on his knees, Jed's gun steady at his head. You can't take them, Samuel said desperately. They're mine. The law... One more word about the law, and I'll show you justice. Jed said, Clara, there's a wagon outside. Can you make it? Clara nodded, though every step was agony. She herded her girls past their father, Emma carrying the baby while Rose clung to Clara's skirts. You'll hang for this, Samuel called after them. Horse thieving, kidnapping. Only if you're alive to tell it, Jed said conversationally. And if I see you near them again, you won't be. The night air was cool on Clara's fevered skin. A simple wagon waited in the yard, hitched to 2 sturdy horses. Jed must have driven hard to get here. The horses were lathered with sweat. Clara got the girls settled in the wagon bed, wrapping them in the blankets she found there. Her hands shook as she climbed up to the seat, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through her body. Jed emerged from the house, walking backward, gun still trained on the door. Only when he reached the wagon did he holster it. Can you hold on? He asked Clara quietly. She nodded, gripping the seat with white knuckles. Jed swung up beside her and took the reins. Then let's go. They rode in silence, the only sounds the creak of wheels and the soft crying of the children. Clara didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. The journey seemed endless. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, held upright only by sheer will and the knowledge that her girls needed her, when she started to fall. Jed's arm came around her, steady and sure. Just a little further, he murmured. You're safe now. Safe. Clara wanted to laugh at the word, but she didn't have the strength. She must have passed out completely because when she woke, they were stopped. The moon was high, casting silver light over a landscape she didn't recognize. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, and in the distance, she could make out the dark shapes of buildings. Easy, Jed said as she stirred. We're here. Where? My place, the Triple C Ranch. He was already moving, lifting Emma down from the wagon. Let's get you all inside. The house was modest but solid, built to last. Jed lit lamps as they entered, revealing clean, sparse rooms that spoke of a man living alone. Bedrooms through there, he said, pointing. Should be big enough for all of you. Clara saw the bed, a real bed with a proper mattress, and nearly wept. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept in a real bed. I'll heat some water. Jed continued. Get those cuts cleaned up. There's clothes in the dresser. They might fit the girls. Were my wife's. He didn't say it, but Clara heard it anyway. She got her daughters settled, their eyes wide as they took in their surroundings. Even in their fear and confusion, she could see wonder there too. The room was clean, safe, quiet, everything their home had never been. Jed returned with water and clean cloths. He set them down and turned to go, but Clara caught his sleeve. Why? She whispered. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because someone should have helped her. My Mary, someone should have been there. He looked at Clara directly. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can do this. He left before Clara could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Clara tended to Emma's face, cleaning the blood away with gentle hands. The girls were exhausted, frightened, but alive, safe. The word felt foreign, impossible, but she clung to it anyway. Outside, she could hear Jed moving around, the sound of him tending to the horses, securing the house, standing guard. For the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to believe that morning might come without pain. She gathered her daughters close, the baby finally peaceful after drinking the milk Jed had warmed, and let exhaustion take her. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was Jed's footsteps on the porch, steady and sure, keeping watch through the night. The spring planting came with calloused hands and hope. Clara had never held a seed with the promise of keeping what grew from it. At Samuel's place, she'd worked the garden only to watch him trade the vegetables for whiskey. Here, kneeling in the dark soil beside Jed, every seed felt like a small rebellion against her past. Not too deep, Jed said gently, his hand covering hers to guide the motion. Corn likes to reach for the sun. His touch was practical, instructional, but Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks anyway. 3 months at the Triple C Ranch had not made her immune to these moments, the accidental brushes of hands, the way he looked at her when he thought she didn't notice. Mama, look, Rose called from where she and Emma were planting beans. I made a whole row. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Clara called back, her heart swelling at the sight of her daughters working in the sunshine, laughing. Even baby Margaret, now 6 months old, gurgled happily from her basket in the shade. They worked through the morning, and when the sun grew too hot, they gathered on the porch Jed had built. It was new lumber, sweet-smelling and solid. He'd added it just last month, saying the house needed a proper place to watch sunsets. Tell us about the horses again, Mr. Jed, Emma asked, her face bright with the fearless curiosity that had returned these past weeks. Jed smiled, settling back against the porch post. He had a way of folding his long frame that made him seem approachable, less intimidating than his height suggested. Well now, let's see. You know Buttercup out there? He pointed to the golden mare in the pasture. She's got Arabian blood. Came all the way from Virginia with a family heading west. They traded her for supplies when she went lame. Thought she'd never run again. But you fixed her, Rose said adoringly. Just needed patience and care, Jed said, but his eyes found Clara's. Amazing what creatures can heal from when they're given the chance. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Clara found herself at the well-worn kitchen table, mending one of Jed's shirts by lamplight. It had become their routine, him working leather or cleaning tack while she sewed. Comfortable silence broken by occasional conversation. You don't have to do that, Jed said, as he always did. I want to, Clara replied, as she always did. She held up the shirt, examining her work. Without thinking, she said, I made you something. Jed looked up from the bridle he was repairing. You did? Heat flooded Clara's face. She hadn't meant to mention it yet, but she reached into her sewing basket and pulled out the carefully folded bundle, a new shirt sewn from fabric she'd salvaged and piece by piece transformed. It's not much, she said quickly, but your others are so worn, and I thought, Clara, his voice stopped her nervous rambling. He took the shirt with careful hands. running his fingers over the neat stitches. No one's made me anything since Mary, the ghost that lived between them. Not threatening, but present. Try it on, Clara said softly. He stood, pulling off his old shirt without the self-consciousness she might have expected. Clara tried not to stare at the lean strength of him, the scars that told stories of hard living. The new shirt fit perfectly. How did you know? I've been doing your mending for months, Clara said, a tempting lightness. I know your measurements better than you do. Something shifted in the air between them. Jed took a step closer, and Clara's breath caught. Clara, he said again, and this time her name was a question. Before she could lose her nerve, Clara rose and placed something on the table, a small bouquet of wildflowers, dried and tied with thread. I found these on my morning walk, she said. I thought the kitchen could use some color. It was Jed's turn to flush. I've been leaving those. I know. Every morning, before you wake. I know. They stood there, the table between them, everything finally in the open. Jed moved first, coming around the table with deliberate steps. Clara didn't retreat. I don't want to presume, he said roughly. You've been through so much. I don't want you to feel obligated. Clara silenced him by placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart race under her palm. I don't feel obligated. I feel... How could she explain? That she looked forward to mornings now, wondering what flower would greet her. That she found excuses to brush against him during chores. That she lay awake at night thinking about the way he smiled at her daughters. The gentle way he handled the horses. The strength in his hands when he lifted heavy things as if they weighed nothing. I know it's too soon, she whispered. I know I'm not. I have 3 daughters and a past that follows me like a shadow. You deserve... Stop. His hand covered hers. Don't tell me what I deserve. I'm a man who hid from the world for 3 years, who let grief turn him into a ghost. Then you showed up, and suddenly I remembered why sunrise was worth seeing. Clara's eyes burned with tears. Jed, he cupped her face with one work-roughened hand. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But Clara, I need you to know, you and those girls, you've brought this place back to life. You've brought me back to life. She leaned into his touch, allowing herself this moment of weakness, or perhaps it was strength. She couldn't tell anymore. A crack of thunder made them both jump. The spring storm they'd been expecting announced itself with sudden fury, rain hammering the roof. The washing, Clara gasped, remembering the clothes on the line. They ran outside together, laughing like children as the rain soaked them instantly. Clara grabbed shirts while Jed tackled the sheets, and they stumbled back inside with their arms full, dripping and breathless. We're making a mess, Clara said, but she was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. It'll dry, Jed said, and he was laughing too. His usually serious face transformed. They stood there, water pooling at their feet, clothes clinging to their skin, and Clara felt wild with something that might have been joy, without letting herself think. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was clumsy, desperate, nothing like the forced affection of her marriage. Jed went still for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, gentle but sure. He kissed her like she was precious, breakable, worth cherishing. When they parted, Clara was crying. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't know why I'm... You're allowed to want things, Jed said softly. You're allowed to feel things that aren't pain. The storm passed as quickly as it had come, leaving the world washed clean. They changed into dry clothes and spent the rest of the evening in companionable silence. But everything was different now. The air between them hummed with possibility. That night, Clara heard footsteps on the porch and found Jed standing there, looking at the stars. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. He shook his head. Keep thinking about that kiss. Heat flooded through her. Jed, I want to court you proper, he said suddenly. I know it might seem foolish, given that you're living here already, but you deserve to be courted, to be asked, not told, to choose. Clara's throat closed with emotion. Choose. When had she ever been allowed to choose anything? I'd like that, she managed. His smile was worth the vulnerability of admitting it. Fair warning, he said. I haven't courted anyone since I was 17. I'll probably make a fool of myself. Fair warning, Clara replied, finding her courage. I've never been courted at all. We'll be fools together. He held out his hand. She took it. They stood there watching the stars, fingers interlaced, and Clara felt something she'd thought was beaten out of her forever. Hope for tomorrow. The next morning, she woke to find not just wildflowers on the table, but a small wooden horse Jed had carved, placed carefully beside Emma's plate. Rose had a tiny bird at her spot, and even baby Margaret had a smooth wooden ring perfect for teething. You're spoiling them, Clara said when Jed came in from morning chores. They deserve spoiling, he said simply. All of you do. Emma and Rose came thundering down from the loft, their delighted squeals at finding the gifts filling the kitchen with joy. Mr. Jed made us presents, Emma shouted, clutching her horse. Can we keep them forever? Rose asked, her bird cupped carefully in small hands. Forever and a day, Jed promised, and his eyes found Clara's over their heads. Forever. The word should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like coming home. That afternoon, while the girls napped, Jed taught Clara to ride properly. She'd only ever ridden farm nags before, but he put her on Buttercup, the gentle mare with the Arabian blood. Feel how she moves, he said, his hand on the small of Clara's back as he walked alongside. Like dancing, almost. Let yourself move with her. Clara had never danced, but she thought she understood. The rhythm of the horse, the warm sun, Jed's steady presence, it all combined into something that felt like music. When she finally dismounted, her legs wobbled, but she was grinning. You're a natural, Jed said, steadying her with hands on her waist. They stood too close, breathing the same air, and Clara thought he might kiss her again. But Emma's voice called from the house, and the moment passed. That evening, as Clara tucked the girls in, Emma asked, Are we going to stay here forever, Mama? Clara smoothed her daughter's hair. Would you like that? Yes, Emma said firmly. Mr. Jed is nice. He doesn't yell or hit, and he makes you smile, real smiles. Out of the mouths of babes, Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. Sleep well, my brave girl. When she came back downstairs, Jed was waiting with 2 cups of coffee, a luxury they rarely indulged in. Thought we could watch the sunset, he said. They sat on the porch, close but not touching, and watched the sky paint itself in shades of gold and pink. Clara, Jed said eventually, I need you to know something. What's growing between us? I feel it too, but I'll never push, never demand. You've had enough of that for a lifetime. Clara set down her coffee and took his hand. I know. That's why I can feel this way at all. They sat until the stars came out, hands clasped, hearts full of unspoken promises. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Samuel was still out there. The town still whispered. The future remained uncertain. But tonight, Clara allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness, in the warmth of Jed's hand, in the safety of this place, in the wild hope that she might, at last, have found home. The dust cloud on the horizon meant trouble. Clara saw it first, her hands stilling on the washboard as 5 riders approached the ranch. Even from a distance, she recognized the lead horse, Samuel's bay gelding, the one he'd won in a card game and treated better than he'd ever treated his family. Girls, inside, she said quietly, not wanting to alarm them but needing them safe. Emma looked up from where she was teaching Rose letters in the dirt. Mama? Now, Emma, take your sisters. Jed emerged from the barn, his movements calm but purposeful. He'd seen the riders too. Without a word, he moved to stand between Clara and the approaching men, his hand resting casual-like on his hip, inches from his gun. The riders pulled up at the gate, beside Samuel. Clara recognized his brother Thomas, mean as a snake and twice as vicious, and 3 hands from the Whitmore ranch. All were armed. "Afternoon," Jed said pleasantly, as if armed men showed up at his gate every day. Samuel ignored him, his bloodshot eyes finding Clara. "Get your things, woman. You're coming home." "No." Clara was proud that her voice didn't shake. Samuel's face darkened. "You don't get to say no. You're my wife. Those are my daughters. The law—" "Funny thing about the law," Jed interrupted. "It also says a man can't beat his wife near to death, says he can't starve his children, says he can't treat his family worse than his livestock." Thomas Whitmore spit tobacco juice near Jed's boots. "You got no proof of nothing. Got a woman who showed up at my door covered in bruises. Got a 6-year-old with a broken nose. Got a baby near starved because her mama couldn't make milk after being beaten." Jed's voice remained conversational. "That's proof enough for me. She's property," Samuel snarled. "Bought and paid for with a marriage license. Her and those girls belong to me." The word property made Clara's stomach turn, but Jed just smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "See, that's where you're wrong. This is my land. Everything on it is under my protection. You want to take them? You go through me." 5 against 1, Thomas pointed out. "You ain't that fast. Collins—" "Maybe not." Jed's hand moved slightly, and suddenly his gun was out, held loose and easy at his side. None of them had seen him draw. "But I'll take at least 3 of you with me. Starting with Samuel, question is, which of you wants to die for his cause?" The hands exchanged nervous glances. They were hired men, not family. Dying for Samuel Whitmore's pride wasn't in their job description. Samuel's face was purple with rage. "This ain't over. I'll go to the sheriff. I'll go to the judge. "You do that," Jed said. "Judge Carter's a fair man. I'm sure he'll be real interested to hear how you treat your womenfolk. Especially since his own daughter married a man who turned out mean. He's got opinions about men who beat women." It was a threat wrapped in reason, and Samuel heard it. He yanked his horse's head around cruelly. "You'll pay for this. Collins, both of you." They rode off in another cloud of dust, and Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. Jed holstered his gun and turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded, then shook her head, then burst into tears. Jed gathered her close, his arms strong and safe around her. "They'll be back," she sobbed into his shirt. "They'll never stop. I've brought nothing but trouble to your door. Hey now." He pulled back to look at her. "You've brought life to this place. You've brought laughter and purpose and—" He stopped, jaw working. "And if they come back, they'll get the same answer. This is your home now, if you want it." Clara searched his face. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Jed was quiet for a long moment. "My Mary died because I wasn't there. I was off buying cattle, building our future, while she faced the fever alone with our boy. When I got back, they were gone." His voice roughened. "I swore I'd never let another woman face her troubles alone, not if I could help it." "I'm not Mary," Clara whispered. "No," Jed agreed. "You're Clara, and that's who I—" He stopped again, color rising in his cheeks. "That's who matters to me now." The next few days passed intense watchfulness, but Samuel didn't return. Instead, the whispers started. Clara heard them when she went to town for supplies, keeping her head high despite the stares and murmurs, living in sin with that hermit, no better than she ought to be. Those poor children, exposed to such carrying on. Mrs. Henderson was particularly vicious, her voice carrying clear across the general store. "Mark my words, no good will come of it. A woman who can't hold her husband's interest, running off with the first man who shows her attention, it's disgraceful." Clara's cheeks burned, but she continued selecting her purchases. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her affected. "Mrs. Whitmore." The voice was different, younger, kinder. Clara turned to find Alice Morrison, the preacher's daughter, holding out a small bag of peppermint sticks. "For the girls." Clara blinked, surprised. Thank you, but I couldn't. Please." Alice lowered her voice. I remember when Samuel started courting you, how bright and hopeful you were, and then—" She glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. "We all saw how you changed, how you got quieter, thinner, more bruised. We should have helped then. Let me at least do this now." Clara accepted the candy with shaking hands, one small kindness in a sea of judgment. But it meant everything. When she returned to the ranch, Jed was working with a young colt, patient and gentle despite the animal's skittishness. He looked up as she approached, and his expression darkened at whatever he saw in her face. "What happened?" "Nothing new," Clara said tiredly. "Just words. Words can cut deep as any blade." He left the colt and came to help her with the supplies. "What kind of words?" Clara hesitated, then told him. Jed's jaw tightened with each repetition, his movements becoming sharp. "They're saying we're living in sin." Clara finished. "That I'm exposing my daughters to impropriety. Samuel could use that. Could say I'm an unfit mother. Then we'll make it proper," Jed said suddenly. Clara nearly dropped the flour sack. "What?" He took the sack from her, set it aside, and grasped her hands. "Marry me, Clara." Her heart stopped. "Jed." "I know it's not romantic. I know you deserve better than a proposal born of necessity. But Clara, He took a breath. "I care for you, more than care. And if marriage keeps you safe, keeps the girls safe, then I'm asking, will you marry me?" Clara stared at him. This good man who'd shown her more kindness in months than she'd known in years. "You don't have to sacrifice yourself for us." "Sacrifice?" Jed laughed, but it sounded pained. "Clara, don't you know, having you here, watching you with the girls, seeing you smile when you think no one's looking, it's not sacrifice. It's the closest to happy I've been in 3 years. I'm still married," she whispered, "to a man who abandoned you, who forfeited his rights the moment he raised his hand to you." Jed squeezed her hands. "Judge Carter will grant a divorce on grounds of abandonment and cruelty. Or—" He hesitated. "We could just do it. Have Preacher Morrison marry us anyway. It wouldn't be strictly legal until the divorce is final, but it would shut the town up." Clara thought of her daughters, of the life they'd built here, of the man standing before her offering protection and possibility in equal measure. And after, when the divorce is final and the town has nothing to gossip about, what then? "Then," Jed said softly, "we see what we can build together, if you're willing." Clara had been property once, traded from father to husband like livestock. But this was a choice, her choice. "Yes," she breathed. Jed's smile was like sunrise. He pulled her close, holding her like she was precious and rare. "We'll do it right," he murmured into her hair. "A real wedding. The girls can scatter flowers. You'll have a proper dress." "I don't need fancy," Clara interrupted. "I just need—" She pulled back to look at him. "I just need you to be sure." "I've never been more sure of anything," Jed said firmly. Then, softer, "Are you? I don't want you to feel forced." Clara silenced him by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. It was different from their rain-soaked kiss, deliberate, certain, full of promise. "I choose this," she said against his mouth. "I choose you." That evening, Jed asked the girls for permission to marry their mother. He did it properly, seriously, giving even little Margaret in her high chair the respect of inclusion. "Would you let him?" Clara asked Emma and Rose. "Would you like Jed to be part of our family?" Rose threw herself at Jed's legs. "Can we call you Papa?" Jed's eyes went suspiciously bright. "If you'd like to, sweetheart." Emma, older and warier, studied him carefully. "You won't hurt Mama?" "Never," Jed said firmly. "And if I ever raise my voice or my hand to any of you, you have my permission to shoot me with my own gun." Emma's eyes went wide. Then she smiled. A real smile. Not the careful thing she'd learned to wear. "Then yes, you can marry Mama." They planned for the following Sunday, after church when Preacher Morrison could speak the words. It wouldn't be fancy. Clara had no illusions about that, but it would be real, and it would be hers, as she lay in bed that night, listening to her daughter's peaceful breathing. Clara allowed herself to imagine it, standing beside Jed, making promises she intended to keep, building a life based on choice rather than obligation. For the first time since she'd fled her father's house in a wedding dress made of duty, Clara Whitmore looked forward to saying, "I do." The wildflowers bloomed golden across the meadow behind the ranch, as if the earth itself celebrated. Clara stood at the edge of the field in her simple blue dress, her best, carefully mended and pressed, while Emma and Rose scattered petals with solemn concentration. Baby Margaret gurgled in the arms of Alice Morrison, the preacher's daughter who'd become an unexpected ally. Jed waited by the old oak tree, dressed in his Sunday clothes, looking nervous as a schoolboy. The sight of him, tall and strong and hers by choice, made Clara's heart thunder beneath her ribs. The wedding party was small but sincere. Preacher Morrison, his wife and daughter, Doc Hartwell, who'd tended Clara's bruises without asking questions, and, surprisingly, Judge Carter himself, who'd expedited the divorce papers with unusual speed. "Dearly beloved," Preacher Morrison began, his voice carrying across the meadow, "we gather here under God's sky to witness something precious, two souls choosing to become one family." Clara barely heard the traditional words. She was lost in Jed's eyes, in the way his hand trembled slightly as he took hers, in the knowledge that this moment was nothing like her first wedding. No fear here, no resignation, only possibility. "Clara," Jed said when prompted, his voice rough with emotion, "I promise to cherish you and your daughters, to provide not just shelter but home, to offer not just protection but partnership, to give not just duty but devotion, all my days, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow. This I swear." Clara's eyes burned. He'd written his own vows, discarding the traditional words for ones that spoke to their particular truth. "Jed," she managed, though her throat was thick with tears, "I promise to stand beside you, not behind you, to build our life with hope, not fear, to trust in your kindness and return it in full, to make our home a place of laughter and love, all my days, in strength and in struggle, in sunshine and storm. This I swear." "The ring?" Preacher Morrison asked. Jed produced a simple gold band, worn smooth. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "She would have loved you." Clara's tears spilled over as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting. "By the power vested in me," Preacher Morrison said, smiling broadly, "I pronounce you husband and wife. Jed, you may kiss your bride." This kiss was different from all that had come before. It was a promise sealed, a future claimed, a choice made manifest. When they parted, Clara saw her joy reflected in Jed's face. "Mrs. Collins," he murmured, and Clara laughed through her tears. The small reception took place on the ranch's front porch. Mrs. Morrison had brought a cake. Doc Hartwell contributed cider, and Judge Carter surprised everyone by producing a fiddle and playing joyful tunes that had the girls dancing. As the sun began to sink, the guests departed with warm wishes and knowing smiles. Alice Morrison pressed Clara's hand before leaving. "Be happy," she whispered. "You deserve it." Finally, it was just their family. Emma and Rose were heavy-eyed with exhaustion and excitement, while Margaret slept peacefully in her basket. "Bedtime, little ones," Clara said softly. "But Mama," Rose protested, "it's your wedding night." "And I'll still be married in the morning," Clara assured her. "Off to bed now." Jed carried Rose up to the loft, while Clara helped Emma. As she tucked them in, Emma caught her hand. "Are things going to be different now?" she asked, and there was old fear in her young voice. "Yes," Clara said honestly, "but good different, safe different, happy different." Emma studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, my brave girl." When Clara descended the ladder, She found Jed had lit candles throughout the main room and their bedroom beyond. The soft light made everything glow warm and golden. "Clara," he said, and she heard the question in it, the invitation and the patience. She went to him, her husband, this man who'd chosen her broken pieces and called them beautiful. "I'm frightened," she admitted. "Of me?" "No." She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong beneath her palm. "Of wanting this, of feeling this, of being disappointed. Clara." He cupped her face gently. "We have time. All the time you need, tonight, next week, next year, whenever you're ready, or never, if that's what you need. You're my wife now." That's enough. Something in Clara's chest, some last frozen piece of fear, melted at his words. "What if I'm ready now?" she whispered. Jed's breath caught. "Then I'll show you how it should be, how it can be when it's chosen, not taken." He led her to their room now, not just his, where more candles cast dancing shadows. The bed was turned down with fresh linens that smelled of sunshine and sage. "We'll go slow," Jed promised, his hands gentle as they unpinned her hair. "You say stop, we stop. You say wait, we wait. You're in charge here, Clara." She'd never been in charge of her own body before. The power of it was intoxicating. "Kiss me," she said, testing this new authority. He did, soft and deep, his hands tangling in her loosened hair. Clara felt heat bloom through her, different from the shame and resignation she'd known. This was wanting. This was choosing. Slowly, carefully, they undressed each other. Clara expected to feel exposed, vulnerable. Instead, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time. Jed's hands mapped her scars with reverence, not possession. "Beautiful," he murmured against her shoulder. "My brave, beautiful Clara." When they came together, it was nothing like the painful duty she'd endured before. Jed was patient, attentive, watching her face for any sign of distress, but there was no distress, only building warmth, only mounting joy, only the shocking realization that her body could feel pleasure instead of pain. "Jed," she gasped, clutching his shoulders as sensation overwhelmed her. "I didn't know. I never knew. I've got you," he promised. "Let go, Clara. I've got you." She did let go, shattering like stars across the prairie sky. And Jed held her through it all. When she could breathe again, she was crying and laughing simultaneously. "Is it always like that?" she asked wonderingly. "When it's right," Jed said, stroking her hair. "When it's chosen. When it's love." Love. The word hung between them, acknowledged at last. "I love you," Clara said, testing the words she'd never spoken to a man. They felt right, true, hers. "I love you, Jed Collins." "And I love you," he replied, pulling her close. "Have from the moment you stood up to me about taking charity, all fierce and proud despite everything." They lay entwined as the candles burned low, talking in whispers about everything and nothing, about the future, the ranch, the girls, about dreams Clara had never dared voice and plans Jed had thought died with Mary. "No regrets?" Jed asked as sleep began to claim them. "None," Clara said firmly. Then, with a smile, he felt rather than saw. "Except perhaps that we didn't do this sooner." His laugh rumbled through his chest where her head rested. "Patience, Mrs. Collins. We have a lifetime now." A lifetime. The word should have terrified her, but wrapped in Jed's arms, in the afterglow of chosen intimacy. It sounded like a promise worth keeping. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Clara woke to find Jed watching her, his expression soft with wonder. "Morning, husband," she said, surprising herself with the easy intimacy. "Morning, wife," he replied, pulling her close for a kiss that promised more later, when little voices weren't already stirring overhead. They rose and dressed, and when Clara emerged from the bedroom, she found Emma and Rose already at the table. wearing their best dresses still. "We wanted to look nice for your first married breakfast," Emma explained seriously. Clara's heart overflowed. "You both look beautiful." Jed made flapjacks shaped like hearts, which sent Rose into giggles and even coaxed a smile from careful Emma. Margaret babbled happily in her high chair, gnawing on a crust of bread. As Clara looked around the table at her family, her chosen, cherished family, she marveled at how far they'd come. From that first desperate night when Jed had carried them away from violence, to this morning filled with syrup-sticky kisses and laughter. "What are you thinking?" Jed asked, catching her expression. "That I'm happy," Clara said simply. "Just happy." And she was, for the first time in her life. Clara Collins was completely, choosingly, radiantly happy. The work of the ranch continued. There were horses to tend, crops to water, children to raise, but now Clara moved through the tasks as a partner, not a refugee. She wore Jed's mother's ring with pride, met the town stairs with her head high, and each night fell asleep in the arms of a man who'd shown her that love could heal instead of harm. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be challenges ahead. Samuel's shadow still lingered. The drought threatened the crops, and 3 daughters would need raising in a hard world. But it was real, and it was good, and it was theirs, and that was more than enough. The winter arrived like a cruel visitor, bringing blizzards that buried the ranch in white silence. At first, Clara welcomed the snow. It meant Samuel couldn't easily reach them, meant the world beyond their fence posts ceased to matter. But as the weeks wore on and the storms grew fiercer, what had seemed like protection became a prison. The trouble started when Jed went to check the horses in the far pasture. His mare returned without him, reins trailing in the snow. Clara's heart stopped at the sight. "Stay here with your sisters," she told Emma, already pulling on Jed's heavy coat. "Keep the fire going." "Mama, no," Emma protested. "The storm." "I'll find him." Clara's voice brooked no argument. She'd lost too much to lose Jed now. The wind hit like frozen knives the moment she stepped outside. Clara squinted through the driving snow, following the mare's tracks backwards. Each step was a battle against the elements, but she pushed on, fear giving her strength. She found him a mile from home, unconscious beneath a dead cottonwood. The branch that had struck him lay nearby, heavy with the ice. Blood stained the snow around his head. "Jed!" Clara dropped to her knees beside him. He was breathing, thank God, but his skin was already cold. "Wake up! Please wake up!" No response. Clara looked around desperately. She couldn't carry him, but she couldn't leave him either. The storm was worsening by the minute. "Think, Clara, think!" She remembered the rope on Jed's saddle, still attached to the mare who'd followed her, working with numb fingers. Clara fashioned a crude travois from branches and her own petticoats. It took 3 tries to get Jed onto it, her back screaming with the effort. "Come on, girl," she urged the mare. "Take us home." The journey back was a nightmare of white blindness and burning muscles. Clara walked beside the travois, one hand on Jed to keep him from sliding off, the other gripping the rope. The wind screamed around them, and more than once she lost the trail entirely, only to find it again by pure instinct, when the ranch house finally loomed through the snow. Clara nearly wept with relief. Emma must have been watching because the door flew open. "Help me get him inside," Clara gasped. Together, they managed to drag Jed to the bed. He was so still, so pale. Clara's hands shook as she examined the wound on his head, a deep gash that needed stitching. "Emma, bring me the sewing box. Rose, heat water, lots of it." Her daughters moved without question, their faces grave. Clara had taught them too well that in crisis, action mattered more than tears. She cleaned the wound with hands that wanted to tremble but didn't dare. The stitching was crude. She was no doctor, but it would hold. What worried her more was Jed's continued unconsciousness and the heat beginning to build in his skin. Fever. In this weather, with no way to fetch Doc Hartwell, fever could mean death. "Is Papa going to die?" Rose whispered. Clara pulled her close. Not if I can help it. For 3 days and nights, Clara barely left Jed's side. She bathed his burning skin with snow-cooled water, forced willow bark tea between his lips, and talked to him constantly about the girls, the ranch, the future they'd planned. You don't get to leave, she told him fiercely during the worst night, when his breathing turned ragged. You hear me, Jed Collins? You promised me a lifetime. You don't get to break that promise. Emma took over caring for her sisters without being asked, cooking simple meals and keeping Margaret entertained. Rose sang the lullabies Jed had taught her, her small voice fighting against the howling wind. On the 4th morning, Clara woke from an exhausted doze to find gray eyes watching her. Clara? Jed's voice was barely a whisper. Oh! She lunged forward, hands fluttering over his face. You're awake. How do you feel? Are you in pain? I'll get you water. Clara. His hand caught hers weakly. Breathe, darling. She did, great gulping sobs of relief. I thought I was so scared. Takes more than a tree to kill me, he murmured. Then, frowning, how did I get home? I brought you... Clara wiped her tears impatiently. Tied you to a travois like a sack of grain. Jed stared at her. In that storm? Clara, you could have died. You don't get to lecture me about taking risks. She interrupted. Not when you're the one who went out in a blizzard alone. I've been doing it for years. Well, you don't do it alone anymore. Her voice cracked. You have a family now. You have me, and I won't be widowed again. Jed Collins, I won't. He pulled her down until her forehead rested against his chest. I'm sorry. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Recovery was slow. The fever broke, but Jed remained weak, frustrated by his body's betrayal. Clara became the one checking horses, chopping wood, keeping the ranch running while also nursing him back to health. On one particularly bad day, when the wood pile ran low and Rose developed a rattling cough, Clara reached her breaking point. She stood in the barn, looking at the dwindling feed supplies, and felt despair creeping in. Mama? Emma appeared at her elbow. What do we do? Clara looked down at her eldest, this child forced to be too adult too soon, and made a decision. We survive, she said firmly. Just like we always have, but this time, we do it together. They rationed carefully. Clara taught the girls to help with chores their small hands could manage. When Rose's cough worsened, Clara remembered remedies her own mother had used. Honey and whiskey, heated stones wrapped in cloth for the chest, steam from boiling pine needles. 2 weeks into their ordeal, when Clara was measuring out the last of the cornmeal, she heard something that made her heart leap. Horses, multiple horses, and voices calling. She grabbed Jed's rifle and went to the door cautiously. But instead of threats, she saw neighbors. The Hendricks from the next ranch over, the Millers from further down, even gruff old Charlie Watts who never talked to anyone. Heard you folks might be having a rough time. Tom Hendricks called out. Thought you could use some supplies. Clara's throat closed. They'd brought food, medicine, firewood. More than that, they'd brought help. Doc's with us, Tom continued. Figured he should check on Jed. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Doc Hartwell examined Jed and pronounced Clara's field medicine damn fine work for an amateur. The men restocked the wood pile while their wives helped Clara with cleaning and cooking. Someone had even brought toys for the girls. Nothing fancy, just cornhusk dolls and carved whistles. But Emma and Rose clutched them like treasures. Why? Clara asked Mrs. Hendricks as they worked side by side in the kitchen. The towns were not exactly welcomed. The older woman was quiet for a moment. You rode out in that storm to save your man. That story's made the rounds, made some of us think about how we've treated you. She paused. My Donald nearly died of pneumonia 5 winters back. I know what it's like to fight death alone. No one should have to do that. When the neighbors finally left, the house felt different. Fuller somehow, despite having the same number of people. It took Clara a moment to realize why. For the first time since arriving in Bitter Creek, she felt part of a community, "See," Jed said from the bed where Doc had ordered him to stay. "Told you this place could be home." Clara sat beside him, taking his hand. "When that tree fell, when I thought I might lose you. Jed, I need to tell you something." His thumb stroked over her knuckles. "What is it?" "I think," she pressed his hand to her still flat belly, "I think we're going to have a baby." Jed's eyes widened. "Clara, are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I've been through it 3 times before." She searched his face anxiously. Is this... Clara. His voice was thick with emotion. "This is... God, this is everything." He pulled her down for a kiss that said what words couldn't. When they parted, both were crying. "A baby," he marveled. "Our baby. The girls will be thrilled." "Let's wait a bit to tell them," Clara suggested. "Until we're sure everything's well. Whatever you think best." He was still staring at her in wonder. A baby. In the middle of the worst winter in memory. With me laid up useless. "You're not useless," Clara said firmly. "You're healing, and we're managing fine. Better than fine. Actually, did you see Emma today? She milked the cow all by herself, and Rose helped me gather eggs without breaking a single one. My girls are growing up strong," Jed said proudly. Then, softer, like their mama. Spring couldn't come fast enough, but when it finally arrived, it brought its own challenges. The snow melt flooded the lower pasture, and they lost several chickens to a fox. But it also brought new life foals in the barn, green shoots in Clara's garden, and the gentle swell of her belly becoming visible. The day she felt the baby move for the first time. Clara was hanging laundry while the girls played nearby. She gasped, hand flying to her stomach. "Mama?" Emma was beside her instantly. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart." Clara took her daughter's hand and placed it on her belly. "Wait, there. Do you feel that?" Emma's eyes went wide. That's your new brother or sister saying hello." The squeal that erupted from Emma brought Rose running. And soon both girls were talking excitedly to Clara's belly, arguing about names and whether they wanted a brother or sister. That evening, as Jed held her close in bed, his hand protective over their growing child, Clara reflected on how much had changed. The winter had nearly broken them, but they'd survived. More than survived. They'd been forged stronger by the trial. "No regrets?" Jed asked, echoing his question from their wedding night. Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Only one." His brow furrowed with concern. "I wish I'd found you sooner," she said. "Think of all the time we'd wasted being afraid and alone." "Wasn't wasted," Jed said after a moment. "Made us who we are. Made us ready for this." His hand spread over her belly. "For all of this." Outside, spring thunder rumbled across the prairie, promising rain for the crops and renewal for the land. Inside, safe in her husband's arms with their children sleeping peacefully overhead, Clara Collins closed her eyes and thanked whatever force had brought her through the storms to this moment of quiet joy. The worst of winter was behind them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The summer evening hung heavy with the scent of coming rain when Clara noticed Emma wasn't with her sisters. Rose was teaching Margaret to make mud pies by the well, but Emma, responsible Emma, who never wandered, was nowhere to be seen. "Rose, where's your sister?" "She went to get more water from the creek," Rose said absently. "A while ago." Unease prickled down Clara's spine. The creek wasn't far, but Emma had been gone too long. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, trying to stay calm. "Watch Margaret. I'll go find her." The path to the creek was well worn, shaded by cottonwoods. Clara called Emma's name, her voice carrying over the gurgle of water. No answer. Then she saw it. Emma's water bucket, overturned on the bank. "Emma!" Real fear gripped Clara now. She ran along the creek, searching frantically. That's when she heard it, a man's laugh, low and mean. Through the trees, she saw them. Samuel had Emma by the arm, dragging her toward a waiting horse. The girl was fighting, kicking and biting. but she was no match for a grown man's strength. "Stop struggling, brat," Samuel snarled. "You're coming with me. Someone's got to pay for what your whore mother cost me, and you'll fetch a good price." Clara didn't think. She burst from the trees like an avenging angel, slamming into Samuel with all her weight. He stumbled, releasing Emma. "Run!" Clara screamed. "Get Papa!" Emma fled, and Samuel turned his fury on Clara. His hands closed around her throat, squeezing. "Should have done this years ago," he hissed. "Should have put you down like the useless." The gunshot cracked like thunder. Samuel's grip loosened, his eyes widening in shock. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then back at Clara. "You—" He wheezed, then toppled backward into the creek. Clara turned to see Jed lowering his rifle, Emma clinging to his leg. He'd arrived just in time. "Clara!" Jed was beside her in 2 strides, checking her throat with gentle fingers. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." Her voice came out rough. "He was going to take Emma. He said he was going to sell—" "Shh!" Jed pulled her close. "It's over. He can't hurt any of you anymore." The sheriff came, along with Judge Carter. They took statements, examined the scene. Samuel's body was retrieved from the creek, and no one seemed particularly sorry about it. "Clear case of defending your family," Judge Carter pronounced. "Man was attempting kidnapping, possibly worse. You did what any husband would do." Collins. After they left, the ranch felt different, lighter somehow, as if Samuel's shadow had physically lifted. But Clara couldn't shake the image of his face, the sound of the gunshot. That night, she found Jed on the porch, staring out at the darkening sky. "You saved us," she said quietly, sitting beside him. "You saved Emma first." His voice was heavy. "When I saw him choking you, Clara, I didn't hesitate. What does that make me?" Clara took his hand. "It makes you a protector, a father, a good man who did what was necessary. I've never killed anyone before. During the war, I was too young. After, I never had cause." He looked at their joined hands. "I thought I'd feel worse about it." "He made his choice," Clara said firmly. "Every time he raised his fist, every time he terrorized his family, every time he came after us. You didn't murder him. Jed, you stopped him from murdering us." They sat in silence as the first stars appeared. Finally, Jed spoke again. "Emma told me what he said, about selling her." His jaw clenched. "There are men who traffic in children, Clara, if he'd gotten away with her, but he didn't." Clara squeezed his hand. "She's safe. We're all safe. Because of you. Because of us," Jed corrected. "You fought him first, gave Emma time to run." The screen door creaked, and Emma appeared, hesitant. "Mama? Papa? Can I sit with you?" "Of course, sweetheart." Clara made room between them. Emma settled in, quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm not sorry he's dead. Does that make me bad?" Jed and Clara exchanged glances over her head. "No," Clara said gently. "It makes you honest. He was a cruel man who hurt people. It's okay to feel relief that he can't hurt anyone anymore." "I was so scared," Emma whispered. "But then you came. Mama, you weren't afraid at all." "I was terrified," Clara admitted. "But being scared for you was bigger than being scared for me." "That's what courage is," Jed added. "Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it." They sat together as night fell properly, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Eventually, Emma dozed off, and Jed carried her to bed. When he returned, Clara was still on the porch, one hand resting on her growing belly. "The baby's been active all evening," she said. "I think they knew something was wrong." Jed knelt before her, placing his hands over hers. "Hey there, little one. Everything's okay now. Your mama was brave today. Brave every day, really. We're really free now, aren't we?" Clara said wonderingly. "No more looking over our shoulders. No more fear of him coming back." "You're free," Jed confirmed, rising to pull her to her feet. "Free to live, to raise our children, to be happy without reservation." The next weeks passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost surreal. Word spread about Samuel's death and the circumstances surrounding it. To Clara's surprise, the town's reaction was largely supportive. Several women approached her quietly, sharing their own stories of cruel husbands, thanking her for showing that escape was possible. "You've become something of a hero," Mrs. Hendricks told her at the general store, giving hope to those who thought they had none. Clara didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a woman who'd finally found the life she deserved and fought to keep it. As her pregnancy progressed, the ranch thrived. The crops grew tall, the livestock multiplied, and the girls bloomed like the wildflowers in the meadow. Emma lost the last of her fearful watchfulness. Rose's laughter rang out freely, and Margaret toddled after her sisters with determination. One golden evening in late summer, as Clara worked in the garden, she felt a different kind of movement in her belly, not the baby's usual kicks, but a low, rhythmic tightening. "Jed," she called, trying to keep her voice calm. "I think it's time." The next hours were a blur of activity. Mrs. Hendricks and Alice Morrison arrived to help, while Jed paced the main room like a caged wolf. The girls were sent to play in the barn with strict instructions to stay put. Labor was hard, as it always was, but different this time. Clara wasn't alone, wasn't afraid. She had women who cared for her attending her, and a husband who loved her waiting anxiously beyond the door. When the baby finally arrived, a son, healthy and loud, Clara wept with joy and exhaustion. "Let Jed in," she told Mrs. Hendricks. "He's waited long enough." Jed burst through the door, eyes wild with worry, until he saw Clara smiling, holding their son. "A boy," she said unnecessarily. "Perfect and whole." Jed approached slowly, as if in a dream. When Clara placed the baby in his arms, his face transformed with wonder. "My son," he breathed. "Our son." He looked at Clara with tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. Thank you for this gift, this life, this family." They named him Thomas, after Jed's father. The girls were instantly smitten, fighting over who got to hold him, sing to him, tell him stories. That night, with the baby sleeping between them and the girls finally quiet overhead, Jed and Clara lay in peaceful exhaustion. "It's been quite a year," Jed murmured. Clara laughed softly. "That's one way to put it. This time last year, I was—" She stopped, not wanting to darken the moment with memories. "You were surviving," Jed finished. "Now you're living." "We're living," Clara corrected. "All of us, together." As autumn approached, the ranch prepared for harvest. Clara worked alongside Jed when she could, baby Thomas strapped to her chest, directing the girls in their chores. The work was hard but satisfying, building something that was truly theirs. One evening, as they all sat around the dinner table, Jed had built a larger one to accommodate their growing family. Emma raised her cup of milk. "I want to make a toast," she announced with 6-year-old solemnity. "To Mama, for being brave. To Papa, for keeping us safe. To Rose and Margaret for being good sisters. And to baby Thomas for completing our family. To family." They all echoed, even Margaret in her babbling way. Later, as Clara and Jed walked the perimeter of their land, checking fences and planning for the future, she marveled at the journey that had brought them here. "I used to dream of escape," she said, "but I never dreamed of this, never thought I deserved this." Jed stopped walking, turning her to face him. "You deserve every happiness, Clara Collins, every joy, every peaceful night, every morning waking up without fear. Don't ever doubt that." She kissed him under the vast prairie sky, tasting love and promise and forever. When they parted, she smiled. "No more doubts," she promised. "Only forward, only us, only this life we've built from ashes and hope." As they walked back to the house, where lamplight spilled golden from the windows and children's laughter carried on the evening breeze, Clara knew with certainty that she was finally, truly home. The woman who'd once cowered in a barn, beaten for birthing daughters, had become someone else entirely. A woman who fought for her children, who chose her own path, who loved and was loved in return. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of coming rain and ripening grain. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Ranching life always did. But tonight, surrounded by family and secured by love, Clara Collins feared nothing. She had been beaten, but not broken. She had survived to discover that life could be more than mere survival. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all, not just escaping the darkness, but finding the courage to step fully into the light. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. I hope Clara and Jed's story touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just like the prairie winds that carry stories from ranch to ranch. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of courage, love, and redemption from the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Clara's journey. What moment resonated most with you? Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunrise.